In an old diner in the heart of the city, a struggling musician offers a free cup of coffee to a lonely old man. What he doesn't know is that this small act of kindness is the final repayment of a debt made 100 years ago. An old melody, a compassionate heart, and a family secret that transcends time. From one simple cup of coffee, a promise from the past awakens, and the life of Leo Miller, the poor musician, will never be the same again. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe to Timeless Stories. A stranger's kindness paid a debt from 100 years ago. It began with a single cup of free coffee, a small act of kindness from a musician with almost nothing to his name. What he didn't know was that this simple gesture was the final payment on a debt he never knew existed. A promise made 100 years before he was born, and it was about to change his life forever. The scent of stale coffee and fried onions was the perfume of Leo Miller's life. By day, he wore a grease-stained apron at the Starlight Diner, a place forgotten by time, its red vinyl booths cracked and its chrome trim dull. By night, he played his grandfather's worn acoustic guitar to the four walls of his tiny apartment, dreaming of melodies that might one day pay the rent that was perpetually late. His fingers, calloused from both hot plates and steel strings, were a testament to his two worlds. Each afternoon, like a clockwork ghost, an old man would appear. He was frail, with a coat that seemed too large for his shrinking frame and eyes that held the quiet dust of many decades. He would slide into the corner booth, the one with the best view of the rain-streaked street, and sit. He never ordered, never spoke. He would simply rest his trembling hands on the tabletop and hum a tune that sounded as old as he was. A wandering, melancholic melody that felt out of place in the modern world. Leo felt a deep, unspoken connection to the old man's loneliness. It mirrored the hollow space in his own chest, the one left by dreams that were fading with each passing day. So, one afternoon, moved by an impulse he couldn't explain, Leo poured a fresh cup of coffee, grabbed a warm pastry from the counter, and carried them over to the corner booth. On the house, Leo said softly, placing the items on the table, "It's a cold day out there." The old man, who Leo would come to know as Arthur, looked up. His eyes, a pale, watery blue, showed a flicker of surprise. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He didn't touch the pastry, but he wrapped his hands around the warm mug, and his quiet humming ceased for a moment, replaced by a profound silence. This became their ritual. Every day, Leo brought him a coffee and a pastry. Every day, Arthur accepted it with that same silent nod. The unspoken kindness became a fragile bridge between two solitary souls in the bustling city. The haunting melody Arthur hummed seeped into Leo's subconscious, a constant, gentle echo in the background of his life. He found himself picking out the notes on his guitar late at night, the sad, beautiful tune feeling strangely familiar, as if it were a memory from a life he'd never lived. One quiet Tuesday, the diner was empty save for Arthur, lost in his thoughts by the window. A feeling of resolve settled over Leo. He wiped his hands on his apron, disappeared into the small back office, and returned with his grandfather's guitar. The instrument was his only real inheritance, its wood polished smooth by generations of use. He sat on a stool behind the counter, the guitar resting comfortably in his lap. He took a breath, his gaze finding Arthur's distant profile. Then, his fingers found the strings and he began to play. It was Arthur's song. The notes flowed out, clean and clear, filling the empty diner not with the sound of a performance, but with the feeling of a shared secret. Arthur went rigid. His humming stopped mid-note. He turned his head slowly, his entire being focused on the young man and the music pouring from the old guitar. The melody, which had been a faint whisper from his own lips, was now alive, a living thing that wrapped around him like a warm blanket. For the first time, a genuine emotion broke through his placid exterior. A single tear carved a path through the wrinkles on his cheek, and a gentle, wondering smile touched his lips, a smile that held the weight of a century. The following day, the warmth of the shared melody lingered in the diner's air, a pleasant ghost only Leo could perceive. Arthur arrived at his usual time, but there was a new light in his pale eyes, a recognition that went beyond their simple ritual of coffee and pastry. He stayed longer than usual, and when he finally rose to leave, he offered Leo a small, genuine smile. It was a currency far more valuable than the tips left by other customers. Hours later, as Leo was wiping down the corner booth, his cloth caught on something wedged between the cracked vinyl seat and the wall. He pulled it free. It was a wallet, made of dark, supple leather, softened and worn smooth with age. He knew instantly it was Arthur's. It felt ancient and sacred in his hands. A sharp, practical thought pierced through him. The thought of his overdue rent, the electric bill tucked under a magnet on his fridge. His heart gave a guilty lurch. How easy it would be, but the thought was a phantom, gone as quickly as it came. The image of Arthur's gentle smile, of the tear on his weathered cheek, was a shield against such base temptations. This wallet was not a windfall, it was a trust. His only thought now was to return it. Hoping to find an address or a phone number, Leo carefully unfastened the clasp. The wallet contained no credit cards, no driver's license, and only a few dollars. It held something far more precious. Tucked into a worn sleeve was a faded photograph, its edges soft as felt. It showed a young woman with a determined gaze and hair pinned up in a style from a long-gone era. Behind her, a simple, stark house stood against an empty sky. She was not smiling, but her eyes held a universe of unspoken gratitude. Behind the photograph was a small piece of folded, brittle paper. Leo's hands trembled slightly as he unfolded it. On it, written in an elegant, looping script, were 5 simple words for the music that saved me. The phrase echoed in his mind, resonating with the very notes he had played for Arthur the day before. What did it mean? Who was this woman? A sudden urgency seized him. This wasn't just a wallet, it was a vessel of memory, a life's most important treasure. Just then, the heavens opened. Rain began to lash against the diner's large windows, turning the world outside into a gray, blurry watercolor. Leo glanced at the clock. Arthur would be halfway to the bus stop by now. Without a second thought, he ripped off his apron, grabbed his thin jacket from its hook, and burst out the door into the sudden, violent downpour. The cold rain soaked him instantly, plastering his hair to his forehead and chilling him to the bone. He ran, his worn sneakers splashing through growing puddles, his eyes scanning the street. He spotted a familiar, stooped figure far ahead, moving slowly under the assault of the storm. "Arthur," Leo shouted, his voice nearly swallowed by the roar of the rain. The old man didn't hear him. Leo pushed himself harder, his lungs burning. He dodged pedestrians huddled under awnings, his focus locked on the frail figure. Finally, gasping for breath, he caught up and gently touched Arthur's arm. Arthur turned, startled, his face a mixture of confusion and concern as he saw the drenched young man before him. Leo didn't say a word. He simply held out the worn leather wallet. Recognition dawned on Arthur's face, followed by a wave of profound, overwhelming relief. He took the wallet, his trembling fingers immediately checking the inner sleeve. His shoulders slumped as he saw the photograph and the note were safe. He looked up at Leo, and his eyes conveyed a depth of trust and gratitude that no words could ever capture. He placed a hand on Leo's drenched shoulder, a silent, powerful acknowledgement of the integrity and kindness he had been shown. In the heart of the storm, a bond that had started with a quiet tune was now forged in unbreakable trust. The bond forged in the downpour seemed to alter the very atmosphere of the Starlight Diner. A quiet understanding now flowed between the young musician and the old man, a current of mutual respect that needed no words. For a few days, Leo felt a lightness in his step. The world, for the first time in a long while, did not seem to be a place of endless struggle, but one of small, profound connections. That feeling shattered the moment he returned home from a double shift, his body aching with fatigue. There, taped to his apartment door, was a stark white envelope with bold, red lettering. It was an official seal, cold and impersonal. A knot of ice formed in Leo's stomach. He knew what it was before he even touched it. His fingers, clumsy with dread, tore the envelope open. The words on the paper were a death sentence to his fragile stability eviction notice. 3 months behind, vacate in 14 days. The floor seemed to drop away beneath him. He stumbled inside, the notice crinkling in his white-knuckled grip. The small apartment, his only sanctuary, suddenly felt like a cage whose door was about to be flung open, casting him out. His gaze fell upon his grandfather's guitar, resting in its stand in the corner. It wasn't just wood and strings, it was a legacy. The keeper of his dreams, the last tangible piece of his family. The thought of selling it had always been a line he would never cross, but now the line was blurring, dissolving into the terrifying reality of his situation. A wave of hollow emptiness washed over him. Hopelessness was a bitter taste in his mouth. The melodies that usually filled his mind were silenced, replaced by a frantic, screaming static of fear. Where would he go? What would he do? The city, once a landscape of opportunity, now felt like a concrete monster ready to swallow him whole. The next day at the diner was a blur of forced politeness and mechanical movements. Every clatter of a plate, every customer's laugh, grated on his raw nerves. He felt invisible, his private crisis a heavy cloak no one else could see. Then Arthur arrived, taking his usual seat in the corner booth. Leo's first instinct was to hide in the kitchen, to avoid the kind, knowing eyes of the old man. He felt like a fraud. How could he offer comfort when his own world was collapsing? But then he remembered the trust in Arthur's face in the middle of the rainstorm. He couldn't let him down. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Leo poured a cup of coffee, his hand shaking so slightly it was almost imperceptible. He placed it, along with a pastry, on the table in front of Arthur. "Good afternoon," Leo said, his voice straining to sound normal. Arthur looked up from the window, his gaze settling on Leo's face. The old man's eyes, which had for so long been distant, were now sharp and perceptive. He saw the faint shadows under Leo's eyes, the tension in his jaw, the carefully constructed smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Is everything all right, son?" Arthur asked, his voice soft but clear. The simple question almost broke him. The urge to confess everything, to let the dam of his anxiety burst, was overwhelming. But he couldn't. It felt wrong to burden this frail, gentle man with the weight of his own failures. It was his problem to carry alone. Leo manufactured a smile, one he hoped looked resilient and not brittle. "Everything's fine, Arthur. Just a long night. Nothing a little coffee can't fix." He gave a reassuring nod and retreated behind the counter, busying himself by polishing already clean glasses. He could feel Arthur's gaze on him, a look not of suspicion, but of quiet, patient concern. For the rest of the afternoon, Leo wore his smile like armor, a brave front against the silent despair that was eating him alive from the inside out. The days that followed were heavy with an unspoken absence. The corner booth at the Starlight Diner remained conspicuously empty. Each time the bell above the door chimed, Leo's head would lift with a flicker of hope, only to fall again when he saw it was a stranger. The silence from that corner was a tangible thing, a void that seemed to absorb the diner's usual clatter and chatter. Arthur was gone. Leo's own worries were a constant, gnawing pressure. The eviction notice on his fridge was a daily reminder of the ticking clock. Each day a grain of sand slipping through the hourglass of his life in the city. The thought of losing his home was terrifying, but the ache of Arthur's absence was a different, sharper pain. He found himself humming the old folk tune under his breath, the melody now a tribute to a friendship that had bloomed and vanished in quiet moments. He worried, hoping the old man was simply unwell, that he would reappear one afternoon with his gentle nod and distant gaze. Exactly 1 week after Arthur's last visit, a man who did not belong at the Starlight Diner walked through the door. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit, and carried a leather briefcase. His polished shoes were a stark contrast to the scuffed linoleum floor. He scanned the room with a practiced, neutral expression until his eyes landed on Leo behind the counter. "I'm looking for Mr. Leo Miller," the man said, his voice calm and professional. Leo's heart seized. His first thought was of debt collectors, of the eviction notice becoming a physical reality. He wiped his sweaty palms on his apron. Leo, he managed to say, his voice barely a whisper. The man approached the counter and extended a hand. "My name is Mr. Hayes. I am an attorney. May we speak for a moment in private?" Numbly, Leo led him to the empty corner booth. Sitting on the cracked vinyl where Arthur had sat for so many afternoons felt like a transgression. Mr. Hayes placed his briefcase on the table and opened it with 2 precise clicks. "Mr. Miller," he began, his tone grave and measured, "I was the legal counsel for a client named Arthur Gable." The name sent a jolt through Leo. "Is he okay?" he asked, the words rushing out. Mr. Hayes' expression softened with a hint of compassion. "I'm very sorry to have to tell you this. Mr. Gable passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 days ago." The words didn't seem real. Leo stared at the lawyer, but he saw Arthur's face. The gentle smile when he played the guitar, the profound relief in his eyes during the downpour. A wave of immense sadness washed over him, so powerful and absolute that it momentarily swept away all his own fears and anxieties. The loss was a physical weight, a pressure behind his eyes. He hadn't known Arthur's last name, his history, or anything about his life, but he had known his spirit, and that was more than enough. Mr. Hayes allowed the silence to settle before continuing. "Mr. Gable amended his last will and testament recently. He left a very specific, and I must admit, unusual instruction concerning you." He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a small, dark wooden box. It was old, its surface smooth and intricately carved. He then produced a single, ornate brass key, which he placed beside the box on the table. "He insisted that these be delivered directly to you," the lawyer explained. "This box and this key were his final inheritance to you. My professional obligation is now fulfilled." Leo looked from the box to the lawyer's serious face, his mind struggling to process the information. An inheritance? For him? He had given Arthur coffee and pastries, small kindnesses that cost him almost nothing. It made no sense. For a moment, his own troubles were completely forgotten, replaced by a deep, aching grief for the quiet man who had become his friend. Leo walked home from the diner in a daze, the city lights blurring into abstract streaks of color. The small wooden box felt impossibly heavy in his hands, a tangible piece of a life he had barely known, yet deeply mourned. When he reached his apartment, the red letters of the eviction notice on his door seemed to scream at him, a cruel joke in the face of his grief. For a moment, the two realities couldn't coexist: the profound sadness for his lost friend and the crushing weight of his own impending failure. He sat on the edge of his worn sofa, placing the box on the small table before him. The air was thick with questions. He looked at the ornate brass key, its metal cool against his skin. With a hand that trembled, not from fear but from a strange, solemn reverence, he inserted the key into the lock. The click it made was sharp and definitive, a sound that seemed to slice through time. He lifted the lid. The box exhaled the scent of old paper and cedar. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a stack of letters tied with a brittle silk ribbon, and beneath them, a thick, folded document sealed with wax. His fingers went to the larger document first. It was heavy, official. He broke the seal and unfolded it carefully. The text was dense, full of legal terms he didn't understand, but certain words leaped out at him. The address of the building, his building, a transfer of ownership, and then his own name typed in clean, modern font: Leo Miller. It was the deed to the entire 4-story apartment building he lived in. His mind refused to accept it. A dizzying wave of disbelief washed over him. This had to be a mistake, a cruel, elaborate prank. He dropped the document onto the table as if it had burned him. His heart hammered against his ribs. He needed to understand. He turned to the stack of letters. He untied the fragile ribbon, which crumbled slightly at his touch. The handwriting on the top letter was elegant. The ink faded from black to a soft brown. The date at the top read October 1923. He began to read. "My name is Eleanor Finch," the letter began, "and I write this so that my children, and their children after them, will never forget the debt we owe. Our family had nothing. The harvests had failed. My husband was gone, and we were days from being turned out of our home into the cold. We were destitute, and hope was a word we no longer knew. Leo's breath caught in his throat. Then, the letter continued. A traveling musician came to our small town. His name was Elias Vance. He had little more than the clothes on his back and an old guitar, but his music filled the hollow places in our souls. He played a song for us, a simple folk tune that spoke of resilience and the turning of seasons. That night, seeing our desperation, he did something no one could have expected. He gave us all the money he had earned in a month of playing, enough to pay our debts and buy seed for the next planting. It wasn't just money, it was life. It was a future. Elias Vance. The name echoed in the deepest chambers of Leo's memory. It was his great-great-grandfather's name. His family had changed it to Miller 2 generations later to sound more American. His own grandfather, the man who gave him the guitar, used to tell faint, half-forgotten stories of a musician ancestor who traveled the country. He frantically read on. Eleanor wrote of her family's recovery, their eventual prosperity, and her unwavering gratitude. She ended the letter with a solemn vow, a promise that burned on the page. We will repay this kindness, not as a simple transaction but as a legacy. My family will find his, and we will return the gift he gave us. We will give them a home, a foundation, a security he himself never had. This debt of the heart must one day be paid. Beneath the letter was the faded photograph from Arthur's wallet. It was Eleanor, the woman with the determined eyes, her image now imbued with a story of incredible strength. And tucked with it was the small, brittle note, "For the music that saved me." It all crashed together in his mind with the force of a tidal wave. The song Arthur hummed was Elias' song, passed down through Eleanor's family for a century. Arthur Gable was Eleanor Finch's great-grandson. He had spent his life holding onto this promise, searching for the descendant of the man who saved his family. Leo's small acts of kindness, the free coffee, the warm pastry, playing that forgotten tune on his grandfather's guitar, were not the reason for this inheritance. They were the final proof Arthur needed. He had found the right man. He had found the heart of his great-great-grandfather beating in Leo. Leo stared at the deed, then at the eviction notice on his door. One was a symbol of his deepest fears, the other, a symbol of a promise kept across 100 years. The world had just tilted on its axis. He was holding a story of kindness, a debt of the heart, finally, miraculously paid in full. At the very bottom of the carved wooden box, beneath the space where the letters had rested for a century, lay one final envelope. It was modern, crisp, and sealed. Written on the front in a shaky but clear hand was a single name, Leo, his own. With a sense of profound reverence, he opened it. This was not a voice from the distant past, this was Arthur, speaking to him one last time. "My dear Leo," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then my long journey has finally come to an end, and a promise made long before either of us was born has been kept. Forgive an old man's sentimentality, but I wanted you to understand that what I have given you is not charity. It is a debt, 100 years in the making, finally repaid. The story you have read in my great-grandmother Eleanor's letters is the bedrock of my life. I grew up with the tale of the kind musician Elias Vance and the melody he played. That song became our family's hymn, a reminder of where we came from and the kindness that allowed us to exist at all. I have spent the better part of my retirement searching for Elias' descendants, a quiet historian on his last and most important quest. I found you by chance working in that old diner. I saw the weariness in your eyes, the same struggle for survival I imagine your great-great-grandfather must have known. So I waited and watched. Your first offering of a free coffee could have been pity, but you did it day after day, with a quiet strength and expecting nothing in return. I saw your goodness, Leo. Then came the day you played the song. When I heard those notes, played on what I knew must be his guitar, I knew my search was over. It was a miracle, a melody carrying a message across generations. Your honesty in returning my wallet, especially when I could see the heavy burdens you were carrying yourself, was the final confirmation. You possess the same selfless heart as your ancestor. This building, which my family acquired decades ago, was always meant for you or someone like you. It was waiting for the music to come home. Do not mourn an old man. My life is complete. I have fulfilled Eleanor's vow. Now this legacy of kindness is yours to carry. Live well, play your music, and never forget that the smallest good deed can echo for a century. Your friend, Arthur Gable. Tears streamed down Leo's face, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming gratitude and a deep, aching connection to the past. He looked at the eviction notice still taped to his door and, with a steady hand, he walked over and gently peeled it off. He folded it and placed it in the wooden box alongside Eleanor's letters, a final, silent testament to the journey he had taken from desperation to salvation. 6 months later, the ground floor of the old brick apartment building was no longer a dusty, forgotten storefront. It was transformed. A warm light spilled out onto the sidewalk from large, clean windows. A simple, hand-painted sign hung above the door, reading The Kind Note Cafe. Inside, the scent of fresh coffee and baked bread had replaced the smell of decay. The space was filled with mismatched wooden tables, comfortable chairs, and the quiet hum of conversation. Leo, no longer in a stained apron but in a simple, clean shirt, moved between the tables, a genuine, easy smile on his face. His grandfather's guitar rested in a stand on a small stage in the corner. His life was no longer divided between two worlds, it was one harmonious whole. He no longer played for his own survival, but for the nourishment of others. A young woman with tired eyes sat alone at a table, nursing a cup of tea. Leo saw the familiar shadow of struggle in her posture. He approached her table with 2 plates, one for her and one with a warm meal. "On the house," he said softly, the words feeling as natural as breathing. Later that evening, as the last of the customers left, Leo walked onto the small stage. He picked up the guitar, its polished wood feeling like an extension of himself. He didn't have to think. His fingers found the strings and began to play the old folk tune. The melody flowed through the empty cafe, out the open door, and into the city night. It was no longer a song of melancholy or forgotten times. It was a melody of hope, of connection, and of a kindness that never truly ends, but simply waits for the next heart to carry it on. It all began with a single cup of coffee, a gesture that seemed so small in a vast, indifferent city. Yet, that simple act of kindness was actually the final note in a song that had been playing for 100 years. It teaches us that the good we put into the world is never wasted, echoing forward in ways we can never predict, waiting for the right moment to return home. If this story of a promise kept across generations touched your heart, thank you for joining us at Timeless Stories. We believe every life holds a powerful lesson, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. When Leo was facing eviction, he still chose to show kindness to Arthur instead of sharing his own burden. What do you believe that single choice revealed about his true character? We appreciate you spending your time with us, and we'll see you in the next story. Join us next time to find out what happens when a retiring postman decides to finally deliver a letter he has kept hidden for 50 years.